All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm with Melco's application team, and I'm here today to do our Design Shop Talk to see what questions you might have. Let me quick check on both Facebook and YouTube, make sure we are up. YouTube, are you playing? I think so. And we are up on Facebook. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. If you have questions while we're live, please type them in on the chat. If you see me looking off to the side, I've got a secondary monitor up, and that's where I kind of see what's going on, so I can answer any questions that you have while we're live. I have a handful of questions that were sent in ahead of time. I'll start off with those. And like I said, if you've got something you're curious about, type it in, and we'll see how we can address it. All right. Someone wants to know, how do I get a service tech? Okay, so if it's under warranty, call Melco. If it's not, or you did something you shouldn't have done, which, we all do that every now and then, you can go to melco-service.com. All right. And right here, see this little map thing? If you click on that, oh, what is this? This is new. That's cool. It'll take you to a map, and you can see all the bubbles. And what you would do is you'd click on the bubbles that has their name and phone numbers and whatnot, and you can reach out to them and see, what their availability is, rates, all that fun stuff. So that's how you get a tech to you. Okay. All right. Someone writes, I don't remember how to change a satin stitch to a border, to a walk, or a triple stitch, or a top stitch over satin, or a top stitch for over the satin. The satin is a top stitch. All right, regardless, let's look at how we change element types. All right, so I got a shape here. I'm going to put a border on it. So I did that really fast. So let's delete it and do it again. The hotkey that I'm always using is Shift is for add, Control is for replace. So if I hold the Shift key down, so I'm pushing on my keyboard, Shift, and then I click on this single line, that adds a border, a constant width, and I'm going to make it wider because I think you want two. You want another bean stitch or something else down the middle of this. So I've got a wide one. So if I want to add, that's going to be my Control key. If you can't remember those hotkeys, that's cool. See this button right here? That's change element from one type to another. All right, so I can click on that, and I can say bean stitch. So the words you used were a triple stitch. A triple stitch is a bean stitch. Okay, so back to here. I'm going to say bean, and I don't want to get rid of the element I've selected. So I don't want to get rid of that satin stitch. I just want to add it. So now I've got a bean stitch down the middle. Now bean stitches can be a triple stitch, as you called it. So that's a thickness of 3, or it can be a 5 stitch or a 7 stitch or a 9 stitch. What do these numbers actually mean? So that let me change the color. All right, so a bean stitch, every time it makes a stitch, it does this many back and forths. So it goes forward, back, forward. That's 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So imagine if it's 5, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why would you use a bean stitch over just a normal walk? It shows up as bolder, right? Because thread is thin. You add, it's kind of like if you take a pen, your pen or a marker or a pencil, and you draw one line. It's really thin. You go over to a second line, it gets a little bolder. If you keep on drawing on it, eventually it gets really bold. Same thing with thread, but thread is physical. It's got width, right? So the more you do it, the wider and bolder it's going to look. Okay. So that adds a bean stitch down the middle. If you want that bean stitch, you go, well, I don't like that. I want to have a thin satin down the middle. Okay. Again, you can change element from one type to another. And you can this time say replace, and let's make it a single line center replace. And now I've got a satin stitch down the middle of my satin stitch. All right, so that's a wide one underneath it and then a thin one on top of it. Okay, so that's changing elements. And just for grins, if I want to add a bean stitch, remember, if you don't want to click on this guy, what's the hotkey? Shift. So shift click, and there you go. Now I got a normal because I clicked on the walk. But if it's the wrong one, I can change it to a bean. Just change it over. Okay, so that's changing element types. Any questions on those? All right, so how do I do this? So this one is one that we have to do manually. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to move that guy out because I don't want to look at it. And I'm going to delete these guys that I just made. All right, so what do I have here? I drew an oval. So I like drawing art or drawing shapes as reference art when I'm doing things like this. So to draw that oval, since I just deleted it, I'm going to go select vector. So if you hold down the complex, right there's my vector. And this is input, circular input. But I want it to be an oval, so I'm going to go from there to there and just drag it until it looks like something. Okay, so what you can do, if you want them to be exactly the same distance, you can use offset. So I can copy, paste, give it another color just because I want to see it. And I can say object offset outline minus 50. Negative is going to bring it in. Positive is going to make it go out, right? All right, so there's negative 50. All right, if you want to just eyeball it, I can copy and paste it. And if I hold the Shift and Alt, now I can just eyeball it. Okay, it's not an exact scale, you can see. So it's really, how do you want this to be done? Right? So I'm just going to continue that way. Copy, paste. I can offset again. So object, offset outline. Let's do minus 40. I'm just picking numbers, if you can't tell. Copy, paste, give it another color, scale it, Shift Alt, copy, paste, Shift Alt, scale it down. What am I doing with this? I am just creating something that I can trace. So what does it actually look like? It, for the most part, really doesn't matter, because all I'm trying to do is give this thing just two colors, something for me to trace, okay? And that is incredibly blinding, so I'm going to change the colors of that one, that one. I'm going to make them something less blinding. All right, that's not less blinding. Okay. Anyway, so that creates that. I'm going to delete that and go get the one I did earlier. Bring it over here because I like these colors. All right, so once you do this, now what? So we've basically created some art for us to trace. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to make sure they're kind of evenly spaced. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take a vector and draw a line somewhere through the middle. And what is this for? That is just so that I'm crossing roughly at the same point every time, right? So when I go creating my spiral, I always want to go to the next row around the same point as we're going. All right, so now that I've got some art on the screen, let's trace it. All right, so I'm gonna go walk. I'm gonna do a bean stitch, and I'm gonna trace around there. So I'm gonna start in the middle of this thing, and let's go, oops. Right clicks are curved points. And now I'm crossing this line, so what am I going to do? I'm going to start working my way over to my next circle. All right, it's not a circle, but... And I'm going to be crossing it, so I'm going to start working my way over to the next circle. Oval. I think I want these to be circles and not ovals. All right, so all I'm doing is... And if you click wrong, let's say... like that, I didn't like how that was looking, you hit the backspace key. So curved, remember your right clicks are curved points. And so you can see all my little lines here were simply to give me guidance, or my vectors, so that I have something to trace. I do this a lot personally. I'll draw stuff with vectors just to give me reference art, so that when that one click I didn't like, so backspace. That way I've got something that I can trace. And because me and eyeballing, well, I like to think I can eyeball things decently. It never turns out how I want. So reference art is better for me. All right. I guess since I've gone down this rabbit hole, I'm going to continue clicking around just so you can see it really doesn't take that long. And all I'm doing is every time I cross that vector line, I jump to my next thing, trying to keep it relatively consistent, right? And that's all. So almost there. And then I'm going to stop that. I'm going to stop after this one once I get to the outer. There. All right. I'm just going to go around in a circle to end this. And again, I called it a circle. And I saw someone typed in a question, but I can't follow that. I'm going to go end it right there. Okay. So let me move that off my art so we can see what we made. Oh, and of course I put it over my other start. That was the other one I started. There we go. So turn off my grid and all of that, zoom in on it, and I've got a spiral off the art that I did, right? So that's the other one I started. It's the same general effect. But yeah, I like to, if I had done offset, they would all be even. You can see these are not even circles. So my art that I'm tracing isn't exactly even, but that's how you can create a spiral pretty quickly. You know, it works a little bit better if you offset all those rather than just copy and paste like I did. Can you show how to set a default for the hoop S? I don't understand the question. Are you wanting to set the default hoop here? You just come, so to save a default here, I would right click on the display hoops, change it to whatever hoop you want, and then say save as default. And that's it. And then that will be your default for new files that you create. Okay. So the other part of that kind of stitch direction, we had the spiral, and then we had kind of this curve stitch direction idea. So this one is really just done pretty simply with a curve stitch direction. So if I delete that, and there were two of them, so I'm going to delete that. So if I have a shape, right here are my stitch directions. If I insert a straight one, that's where it's just a straight fill, right? And that's not what we want. So I'm going to delete that. But if you hold that button down, there's a curve stitch direction. So here I can add curve stitch directions, and I'm going to put a straight one right on the edge here to force that curve look. Okay. So you can see I can move this around, and if I hold my control key, that'll make it a perfect little arch, right? So I can add more of these, less of these. I can put one in and then use the variable densities and things like that. So that's how you do them. Then it's just a matter of playing with it until you get the look you want. Okay, so here I put a straight one on the edge. I added a curved. You can also come over here, go into properties, and tell it to add a custom density. And from there, now you can do different densities along it to see if that changes it. Reverse, you know, it can give you different looks, if you will. I don't want that one. That one's pretty cool. I like that. Anyway, so you can just play with it until you get the curved look you're wanting to go with. Okay. All right. So where did my slides go? So we talked about my curvies and the curve stitch direction. Cool. All right. So this guy here says I'm having trouble with a round design. So number one, this design's huge, right? And I'm guessing it has a gazillion stitches. So you've got to, when you're dealing with big fills like this, so when I mean a big fill, you've got, it looks like it's sewing this way, right? So it's going back and forth, but along this direction for the fill, which you'll notice that's why it's kind of close here, but everything shifts and pushes. So the push direction is causing it to go oblong, right? So it comes out this way. All right, so what do we do to prevent that? Well, when you have this many stitches, it's going to happen somewhat. All right. So ways we can prevent, and you got to remember also part of why it's happening is because stuff's moving. All right. So think about that. When it's moving, you need to make sure that you're holding everything nice and stable. All right. So some things you can do for that. You can bond some stabilizer to the back of the blanket, right? And that would secure the fabric. What I would recommend would be changing the digitizing some. My dog is really mad that I locked him out because he was a pain last week. So I locked him out, so now he's barking at the door. Let me let him in and see if he behaves. Come on. You're being rude. You're being rude to my presentation. I don't like it. All right. So let me show you an idea. All right. This is 11 inches. I don't think yours was. How big was yours? Where's my slide? I should have counted that beforehand. That's what, 5 inches? So yeah, probably 11 inches, 10, 11, something like that. All right, so I'm gonna make it 10 just for grins. All right, so one technique you can use is to break this up. And all right, I'm all over the place and I apologize. A few ideas. One, do it as an applique. If you put applique fabric down, what that's going to give you is, it's number one, it's going to cover up the blanket so you won't see the fabric ghosting through. It'll reduce your stitch count so it sews faster, and you won't have any of that push-pull, right? So you're not going to have that effect that we're trying to minimize. Okay. Another way we can address that would be to kind of do the underlay. Basically, we need to tie that stabilizer to the blanket so the blanket can't move around at all. Okay. So how can we do that? Well, if I digitize the underlay, all right, so the under as a separate element and kind of do it in different quadrants and then go over it, I have tied that stabilizer super well to the fabric and held that fabric still so that when my top stitching comes over it, the fabric can't move, which is what's happening on you. Everything's moving, right? So how can we do that? Well, if this is my circle and I'm going to sew over it when I do my actual fill, well, if I come through here and do it quadrant based, right? So each of these quadrants, sew it like these two, center out, these two, center out, and then come back over it with a really open fill, that would work out probably well. So how can I do that? I'm going to copy and paste. And remember I said earlier, I like to draw vectors so I have reference art. And that is all I'm doing right here. All right, so 10 inch, that's going to be my final design. So I've got this guy here as just a reference. Yeah, I like that. All right, so let's split it up. I'm going to use insert splice line from here to here and from here to here. Now I'm going to right click on the element, operations, break object. So now I've got, I've got 4 segments here. All right, so let's take those and let's turn them into fills. So you can either just straight convert, that's not going to do what I want, but you can do it that way and then modify it. So since I did it, let's use it. I'm going to go to properties. Let's take it from being a full fill to, oops, turn off auto. Let's make that like 50, 70. All right, so I'm going to do that. The underlay, I'm going to turn off auto, make that one none. Border margin 0, density the same as the other one, and this 90. Okay, cool. Oh, properties. Let's make my stitch angle. Is that right? Yeah, because I want to push out. All right, so I'm going to give it a start point and a stop point, so it sews that way. Same for this one. I can then go to this guy down here, give it a start point, a stop point, and it's going to sew that way. So being lazy, I'm going to copy and paste and rotate 90. And close enough for what we're doing here. Actually, no, it's not, because my splice lines weren't even, so we're not going to do that. You get to see all my fumbling here. There we go. So I just added a stitch direction to that vector. I'm going to take this guy, go into the properties so I don't have to reset them all. Come over here and paste properties. This one's going to be 0. This guy here, again, I can paste properties. Well, it helps if I actually put stitch direction on it first. And now I can again paste properties. Change my stitch direction. Cool. All right. So what would this do for me? Let's turn off all those vectors so we can look at it. All that's doing is this is sewing underneath and stabilizing your stabilizer to your blanket to stop it. So when you come over with your fill, it's not going to move, right? So you can do stuff like that. You can change to applique. You've got to realize it's going to, even if you do all these techniques to hold it all still and to prevent it from wanting to move much and stuff like that, it's going to move a little bit. So maybe add a really wide satin border around your fill before you move on to all the detail work. Okay, so let me pop back over, see if we have any questions that I missed. So that's where I would start with this, is working on the underlay, right? And the stabilizing of getting your stabilizer and that blanket to lock together so they can't move around, because this pull effect is because of motion, right? So we've got to minimize that motion. So that's what you've got to think about, how you've got to do that. Like I said, I would probably fan out that underlay and then come back over, because then I've really nailed that stabilizer to the blanket. Another technique you can try is, you can see the pattern looking through the white. So if you want to try to cover that, again, you can either go applique, or remember, motion is your thing, so is what's causing this. So you can actually take like the fusible stabilizer, lay it on top as if it were an applique, right? So as we're doing this step right here, have a big old piece of fusible stabilizer with the fusible side down towards the blanket, right? Sew this stuff. Then come and cut all that away, all the blue, so that you're left with a piece of stabilizer here. Go over and take your hoop out, grab an iron and iron it and fuse it to the blanket, because now your fill stitch comes over, it's going to cover it. Plus now you've added a layer of stabilizer on top to help ghost and cover up that ghosting of the fabric coming through. So that's another kind of fun idea. It's all going to get sewn over anyway, but the key is you'd have to make sure it's cut away so that you're not having fusible out here on your blanket, which would not be good. Anyway, that's how I would do it. Well, any questions? Different ideas for you to think about anyway. But yeah, the fill is causing it with the push-pull, because you can see it's sewing this way. So this edge is going to push out more, which is exactly what you're seeing there. What are we able to do with non-OFM files? Well, you can do lots. Should you do lots? That's debatable, but let's go see. So if I go open a file, let's go to, where's my C drive? This PC, C, Designs, EXP. That's an expanded file. All right, so this is an expanded file. So I think we do have some videos and links that we can get you on expanded editing, okay? But, so expanded editing, you can do stitch point editing. I think I did that last week, showing you how to move individual stitches around or to split elements up. You can do all that. You can change densities. So let's say these leaves, if I go into scale, down here, you can change densities of columns, of fills, of things like that. You can add some pull compensation. It'll adjust it somewhat. You can scale expanded files. I highly recommend scaling by percentage, and don't just drag and call it good. The reason being, when you're working with expanded files, there's no wireframes, there's no math telling the computer, all right, I want to have all my stitches 20 points apart and my rows between stitching 4 points. There's no math there. It's just, here are the coordinates of where I am to move my machine, right? So if you scale it up or down, at some point you're going to be affecting the quality of the sew out. I think the rule of thumb is no more than plus or minus 30%. I personally prefer plus or minus 10 to 15%. If I'm scaling more than that, before I sew it, I look through it and make sure it all still makes sense and I haven't ruined the look of what I'm going for. So how do you scale by percent? Select what you want to scale, and then down here you'll see a W and an H. It really doesn't matter which you click on. It brings you to the same screen. See that? So I can come over here and say, make this 110%. So it scaled it up by 10%. So you can scale, you can modify your densities if I want to go into stitch point editing. So let's say I just want to fix, I want this edge of the bird to move over. Not that I want to, but let's just pretend. All right, so I can go into expanded point editing, which that's this guy right here. And I can go custom point selection and say, all right, let's grab all of those stitches right there. And then I can hold my shift key and move them over. So shift and click, you see they're moving over. And it's just shift and arrows, that's all I'm doing. So I'm going to be ridiculous about it. Okay, so you can do groups, point editing like that. You can do individual stitch editing, saying, all right, I don't want that stitch there, I want it over there. Okay, so that's all part of what you can do with expanded point editing. So what else can we do with expanded files? We talked, oh, you can do rotations. So if I select the element, I can click it again. Right here is rotate. If you want to rotate by number, you can again click on your W or H, and down here you can say I want a 15-degree rotation, or I want a negative 15 rotation, whichever it might be. So you can rotate by number, you can scale by percent. If you want this to be exactly 3 inches, you can scale by number. Like I said, when working with expanded files, I do recommend using percentage just to keep track of that rule of thumb in your head, no more than, I like to say 10 to 15%, but I think the general wisdom is plus or minus 30%, no more. Okay. You can change colors. So you can break elements apart, and we did that last week, so I won't do that again unless you really want me to. Yeah. What other questions about expanded? Any? Let's see. How do we create a custom marrow borders within DesignShop Vector? So the marrow border is a decorative stitch, right? So let's say I want to turn this into a patch. So I can go to decorative, change this to the faux patch. The faux patch, there's a, Danielle, where do you send questions? Right there. Just type it in and I'll see it. Yeah, so there's a border. Not a very good one, but there's a border because I traced it really badly. All right, so how did I do that? Oh my gosh. No. Right here, I click on walk, change it to decorative, select the faux patch. You can draw whatever shape you want, right? So I'm just left clicking right, or left click to start, right click around. When you want to close the shape, shift enter, it'll close the shape. And there you've got a faux marrow border. And it doesn't have to be curved like that. It can be, you know, whatever shape you want to go with. So it's just a decorative stitch, faux patch. Yeah, Danielle, just if you type in your questions, I'll see them and see what we can get answered. Okay. What other questions do we have? Where's my question thing? Oh. All right. So we covered all those. Let me scan through the list and see what I missed. Anything? I don't see any missed. So in general for questions, the ones I collect ahead of time, in the Facebook groups, and these are the actual, right here are the names of the groups I post in. So there's, oops, for the love of Melco embroidery machines, the Melco embroidery machines for businesses, and then there's an international group. This one, it's US plus international, but that one has a lot of folks overseas. So I posted those 3 for questions. So that's where you'll see this little banner with me asking, hey, what questions do you have for this week? So if you type them in on those, I'll prep stuff ahead of time. If not, while we're live, you can always type in on the chat. And I check the chat periodically. I can't believe I'm calling it a chat. My kids made me swear I'd quit calling it typing in talks, that I'd call it a chat. Anyway, but if you type in there, I'll see those questions and try to get on them live. So what other things do you guys want to learn about? If you let us know, you can always send, things you want to learn about over to applications@melco.com. And that goes to our application team, and we can either add it as something for a dedicated video, add it to these DesignShop Talks. MK Buddy has another. Great. I will waste some time until I see it. So let me know what your question is. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so you can email any questions, more things you want to learn, and we'll try to figure that out for you. What's the best format for it? Yeah. My new fun is I hurt my arm. So I got this stupid brace. It's pink because, it's a great color. Tennis elbow. Really fun. 3 months of no rowing. And I'm supposed to be racing in July. So yay. All right. What if your machine stops? So it's locked out. You turn it off and back on, and it doesn't line up to where it stops. I know there's a nudge option that can be used. It should return to the last stitch. All right. So if it returned to somewhere else, you just fast forward using the reverse or backwards key, the forward or back keys on the keypad. So frame back or frame forward until you get to the correct correct spot. So you would look at that. The nudging hoop jog are these buttons. It's hoop up and down or left to right. That moves your machine around. So you can do that. And then there, retain position. That's the button right there. So XY retain position is up and down. So yeah, you can jog the hoop around using your hoop and arrow buttons. So hoop and that. And if you want it to stay where it was, you're going to have to hit your up and down buttons at the same time. That tells it wherever you think you're supposed to be, that's where you need to be now. All right. And then it will stay there. So we have a link for the keypad functions. So we had a question typed in, how do I connect designs along a line? So, I know I did that early February in a DesignShop Talk, and I covered it maybe 2 weeks ago as well. I think it was February 13th. And the only reason I know that is because I think that's the date I looked it up. This Dropbox, I'm going back to check that for you because it's where I did the big old welcome. So it was this year, I think the 10th? Yeah. All right. So check out the DesignShop Talk from 210, and that will show you how to take a really big design and set it up so that you can continue hooping it and going. There's another video we've done. It was around Christmas time, maybe 2 years ago now, of doing a piece of holly on a ribbon, and that was a continuous design. So showed how to do that. There's also a video that Sue and Nate did on a big old banner that had a set of branches and a pumpkin in the middle. So that's another that goes over that same technique. So those are the 3 that I would suggest looking at, but the DesignShop Talk from the 10th is the one where I covered pretty extensively setting up the file and creating it and how you go do that. And then another one which is on a smaller scale. So let's say you don't want to do monstrous like that. You just want to be continuous. The holly video from Christmas time is a good one. And we did get you a link in the comments. That's what I was not supposed to call it according to my kids. We have a link in the chat for continuous embroidery to those techniques. So check that out too. All right, what other questions do you guys have? Okay, I don't see any others typed in. Yeah, I think I caught them all. Sorry, I'm trying to scan through all the chats to see if I missed anything. Okay, I think we are good. So, with that said, I will be back next Friday. And so, school is out tomorrow. Counting down the hours at this point because I'm done with the school year. Yeah, I'm gonna go learn how to be a coxswain in a boat since I can't row the boat. I'm gonna pout all weekend and try to cox a boat with 8 other rowers in it. So that should be fun. That's my weekend plans. You guys have a fantastic holiday weekend, and I will talk to you next week. Bye, everyone.